Hello everyone, and welcome back to TOXstream, the live streaming show of AlterTox Academy, which brings you the latest news on science and alternatives to animal testing. My name is Matteo, I'm the host of this space, and well, we're finally back. It's been a while that we did our last episode. I apologize for that, but we have been busy. We have been traveling quite a while. If you've seen our LinkedIn page, you've seen that we have been pretty much in every conference in the last few months, and we've been busy in changing our office. We are in another space, which is bigger and nicer and a bit empty for now, but we will slowly bring all our equipment back. But we're finally here, and very happy to be indeed here in live again. A few very quick words for the people that don't know what's happening and they might connect it by chance or by mistake. AlterTox, we are a Belgian company. We are focused on one specific thing, which is the promotion of alternatives to animal testing. And we do this, maybe I should stay closer to the microphone, and we do this in many different ways. We work with ZeroPM project who are developing these alternatives, and we do the communication dissemination there. We are also involved with the companies who are actually developing their own product, and we try to help and disseminate these alternatives, whether with trainings, conferences, or also with consultancy activities. And we even have our educational line of product focused on alternatives to animal testing. For example, the Tata Box, which is our board game that we developed specifically to teach to people how these things works. So if anything of the things that I just said catch your interest and you want to know more, you can have a look on our website, altertox.academy.pe, and everything is there. All the information, all the contacts is there. But what about TOXstream? What about what's happening now? What you're looking now? If it's the first time you join us, well, welcome. What we do here, it's always the same thing. We give a voice to experts, people that have something very interesting to say. Focus, of course, on one side on alternative to animal testing, but also on science in general. And that's what we're going to do now. So we're going to have a couple of guests, as usual, and you have the chance to interact with them. You can use the chat, whether you are on YouTube, LinkedIn, on Twitch, doesn't matter. Just put whatever you have in mind there, question, comment, suggestion, and I'll do my best to bring their attention to our guest. But the topic of today, to finally jump exactly what we're going to do today, is something that is kind of becoming a series in TOXstream, because it's already like the fourth time that we do an episode around this specific aspect, which is or are EU-funded project. And today specifically, we talk about this European project, which is called ZeroPM, and I'll try to tell you why it's important that we talk about it and why it's a very cool project on what they're trying to achieve. So ZeroPM is dealing with one of the most interesting and important type of substances that there are right now in the environment, which are the so-called persistent and mobile substances, or forever chemicals. You might have heard them called them that way in normal newspapers because they're a more catchy name. But that capture actually the reason why these substances are important, because they are persistent, meaning that they tend to stay whatever they, when they ended up in the environment, they tend to stay there in the sense that they don't disappear because of their chemical composition and whatnot. And they are mobile in the sense that they can travel and move around very easily, especially when they come into contact with water, which is particularly problematic because it means that they can easily enter in the water that we drink, and therefore in us. And since they are persistent, when they get inside, they kind of stay there. And the type of substance that is persistent and mobile that you might have heard more is probably PFAS, which is just one type of this substance. And it's quite everywhere. So not only these substances are persistent, so they tend to stay in the environment and they move around, but they are also coming from very different places. As you can see from this very simple infographics, to cut a very long story short, PFAS and persistent and mobile substances in general, they can arrive from very different sources to which we are exposed pretty much every single day, from clothing to food to pesticides to cosmetics. So it doesn't really matter. In a way or in another, we are exposed to this sort of substances on a daily basis. And another way to point this, to drive this point forward is to show you this map that you might be familiar already, because again, this actually is not even a scientific article, but this came out on Le Monde, so it was a more general newspaper, and it was a very nice initiative from different journals a couple of months this year, I think, to try to map the sources of contaminant of PFAS, so either places where PFAS is present in the environment or places where PFAS is produced and used. And as you can see from the map, I don't have to explain that much, it's pretty much everywhere. So it doesn't really matter where you are, there's a good chance that you live quite close by to some sort of source of persistent and mobile substances. And you may be like, well, I don't really care, why should I care? Well, different reasons, but probably the most easy one to answer this question is that there are different issues with these substances because they have been linked to various harmful effects for human health and the environment. And here, again, it's just a very short summary of what might happen, because these PM substances, they seem to be able to have an effect on the immunity system, for example, lowering the efficacy of vaccine, which is unfortunately quite important right now. But it can also have an effect on the development of a reproductive system in kids and even in the fetus. And it's also linked to cancer or different type of cancer. So definitely these are substances that we should have an eye on. And everybody has an eye on them, actually. And these actually spilled even out of the scientific community. A couple of years ago, I think in 2019, this blockbuster came out, this film called Dark Waters, which actually tells the story of one of these PM substances, not even PFAS, I think it's PFOS, but again, it's just one type of this substance, and how much this posed problem in the environment. So if you didn't see it, I really highly encourage you to have a look, even though it's pretty sad, so you might lose some faith in humanity after that, but it's a very interesting piece of work. So for all these reasons, today we're going to focus on ZeroPM, because as you probably guessed for the name, ZeroPM deals with persistent and mobile substances. They have different ways of dealing with that. As you can see, they want to prevent, prioritize, and remove. We're going to go a little bit in depth and try to understand exactly how and why. And as I said, this is probably the beginning of a series on different videos, because ZeroPM is part of the so-called EU chemical strategy for sustainability and the zero pollution ambition, which means that the European Commission and the European Union is trying to reach a point where there is no pollution anymore in the environment, which is great on paper, very hard to achieve. And ZeroPM is just one piece of the puzzle there. But there are other European projects that are trying to achieve the same thing, and you see a couple of them here on screen. In the next months, we are going to go through them and see how all these together try to reach this objective and why they are important in their own specific way. So that was all that I wanted to say, and is more than enough of time for me to speak. So it's finally time for you to meet our experts. Oh, let me change the... Okay, cool. Hi, Hans. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Matteo. Pleasure to be here on TOXstreams.
Very good.
Thank you for accepting the invitation. One very quick thing. Sarah is not dubbed. We have a little delay in the audio, but everything is fine apart from that. So sorry about that, but it's going to be fine. I'm going to just give a very quick word of introduction for the both of you, and then you can also add something yourself. So Hans, Peter Arp is a professor at the, I'm going to read it so I don't make a mistake, Norwegian University of Science and Technology in Oslo, formal training in environmental science, decades of experience there, and also the project coordinator of ZeroPM. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation and being here with us. While Sarah, okay, that's much harder. So I'm not going to try to say exactly where you work because it's impossible for me to pronunciate it, but researcher at the
English. You can say it in English. It's the German Water Center, TZW.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Also environmental research and decades of experience on that. So I think, and also working in ZeroPM, I'm responsible for the communication, and also very expert and important to create the project from the beginning. So it's great that you accepted to be here. Do you want to add something yourself?
No, I think that sounds good. We can jump right into it if you want.
Perfect. Okay, so usually I don't jump straight into the project because it's fine, but I also want to start with some easier questions just to break the ice. And I'm also always very interested in knowing how my guest ended up being here, not specifically here in TOXstream, but more like what was your path in life? How you ended up being working so much in environmental science? Was this something that started from when you were a kid, or you ended up here kind of by mistake? So just want to have a summary of the last 30 years of your life, and then we jump in ZeroPM. I want to point people, but you can also interact with each other if you want. Sarah, let's start with you.
Oh, okay, because that's the most interesting story. No, for me, obviously, you know, I'm English and I'm sitting in England, but I work for a German company and I used to work in Norway. So I have a very interesting path. But for me, it was more indecision. I really enjoyed lots of different parts of science and then found it difficult to choose at university, which led me to have to do extra work to actually finally choose. Then I was going to be a chemist. So I thought, okay, great. How can I get things into the environment? How can I get things into action? And then I did a master's and a PhD in environmental chemistry. And after that, moved over to Norway. This is where we got ZeroPM funded, which was great. Then I moved back to England. That's where I'm from. I love it. And changed jobs. And also I have this other position as well. I work as a consultant for Arcadis. So I really take my research in environmental chemistry and put it into practice. So that's kind of that's me in a nutshell. It was chance and enjoyance of everything, really.
Okay, great. I mean, it's always good for me to hear that people ended up, you know, sometimes you have to make some wrong turn to end up in the place where you want to be, because definitely my path was not straight. So it's always nice to hear from someone else. Thank you, Sarah. Hans?
Yeah, okay, just a little bit of biography. I'm originally from Canada, from the province of New Brunswick, and I first studied chemistry as a bachelor student. And the reason I got into chemistry was because I was at that age trying to figure out the mysteries of life, the universe, and everything. And when looking at the different options in science and other places, I felt chemistry was in the middle of physics and biology. It was sometimes referred to as essential science, and I really enjoyed it, and I specialized in physical chemistry. But after I got the degree and, you know, the people from the companies were recruiting, I realized I didn't want to do that as a career, to be a chemist at that time. And then I actually didn't know what to do. So I switched to literature. I started backpacking. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. But then I ended up on the idea of environmental science because I was also interested in the environment. And then I studied environmental science in Germany at the University of Tübingen. And then I found out that there was a sub niche in environmental science called environmental chemistry. And I'm like, whoa, that's where I want to end up. And then so I went to ETH Zurich to do my PhD with one of the fathers, I think, of environmental chemistry, René Schwarzenbach. And then from there went to Norway at the Norwegian Geotechnical Institute and been there since. So I didn't know where I ended up, but it's a fairly linear path, though it was interdisciplinary and transboundary.
Oh, wonderful. I mean, I would love to spend half an hour asking you how you ended up from literature to chemistry, but maybe another time. No, that's great. Okay, that was just to frame a little bit your figure and your background here. But indeed, we are here to talk a little bit more about ZeroPM. I try to give a little bit of an introduction, but of course, I couldn't be exhaustive. And you are the people that know the most about it. I'd like just from you a very short summary, if there is something you want to add on what is actually ZeroPM and what you're trying to achieve. But then I would be also much more interested in knowing how you came up with this idea and what was the process. Say, okay, I want to do this thing, I want to do it this way, and this is how I'm going to do it to manage to have the money and all the resources that I need to do it. Let's start with Hans this time, and then we move to Sarah.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say maybe how the idea came up. And that was, well, Sarah and I have been working with persistent mobile substances for a long time. Well, relatively a long time, I think since 2014, as when we started working on a research project with Torsten Riesma called the JPI Promote, and then we've worked on other projects as well. So we were already involved in the persistent mobile issue. And when the call came out to propose ideas, the thing that has been driving us was there was a lack of a holistic approach to looking at the PM issue, particularly in terms of solutions, because when you're talking about chemicals that are produced and end up in drinking water, there's a lot of actually stakeholders involved there, such as you can start going down the supply chain from the chemical manufacturers to the purchasers of chemicals to the people that are treating the water, that are drinking the water. And there's also a lot of regulators involved too. And it wasn't often that, for instance, regulators in the chemistry world were talking to regulators from the water world. And it's the same, it wasn't even also common that chemical manufacturers were talking with producers of drinking water to understand each other's concerns. And that's what we wanted to link to be more holistic and not look at one part of the life cycle, but all of it. So that's how the idea came up. And then it was a question of how to put that all together. So, and then that was the origin of the idea. But maybe I'll hand it to Sarah to explain what we ended up doing.
No, that's great. Indeed. I mean, it's important to frame that this is not, I'm going to do this specific thing. No. You have to do them all. How are you good at them all, Sarah? How did you manage?
Well, do you know what? Actually, normally in these kinds of situations, it's more who you know and what they know. And also, so Hans-Peter and I, we worked together for ages. He's just said that, and we're kind of experts in what we do. That's great. But you also need a big network, and you need to understand how to put this network together in the best way to have a really cool project. So we started off with actually a document that was leaked. Don't tell anyone. Often they are, but that's a good tip. You can find out what they might fund before it's actually released on the website. And somebody who I was working with in another project sent me that document and said, this is really cool. And I read it, and it was about exactly what we wanted to do research on. And I kind of said to him, you're not thinking of applying, are you? Because I'm going to do that instead. I can be quite bossy, and then that was kind of how it started. So Hans-Peter and I, then my next person I send it to is Hans-Peter, because he's my favorite collaborator. And then we started with this, wow, we should really apply. This is totally going to be our project. We can own this. We know what to do. We know what they're looking for. And we started off basically with blank sheets of paper at my house with my daughter's felt tip pens. And we just were drawing pictures and throwing around ideas. And Hans-Peter and I normally know what each other is thinking before we say it, especially, to do with science. We're not married, so not at home, just with the science. And that makes it much easier, because then we already had this idea. And then we went from the idea that we really believed in to pitching it to everybody else. So that was also something that we did together, and we identified who would we like to work with. Also, who did we not want to work with? You have to make a nice project. You have to make sure that you're really happy with your partners that you're working with, and that you're totally in tune with them. Leading a big research project, it's about the science, but it's also about project management and people management and perception and understanding of how to make them motivated too. So that was really important. So then what did we do, Hans-Peter? We just spoke to everybody, basically. We set up meetings and just chatted to individual partners. I phoned a lot of people and said, we're going to do this idea. Please don't do your own idea. You want to join our idea. Our idea is quite clearly the best because, and some people like that in me. And some people were like, yeah, definitely. I'm totally going to join. That sounds really good. And for some people, it took a little bit more persuasion. But we ended up, Hans-Peter, I think, with everybody that we wanted in our project.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great story. I think you pointed a few points that it's always important, and it's always what I try to say to the young researchers that I meet around, that the network that they are doing now, the people that are meeting now, might be the people that you have to collaborate, 10 years down the line to do an European project. And I think I don't know how many European projects actually have been created on the back of a napkin in a pub at some point 10 years ago.
Hans-Peter and I met at CTAC in 2007. 9. Yeah. And then and that's how it started, really. That really is how it started. That's totally true.
It's fascinating. I would love to make just a series about that, but maybe in the future. Okay, no, that's great. Okay, I think I'm ready to learn more about what ZeroPM is actually trying to achieve and how. Usually the way in which I do it is to jump from science to everything else. But I have this impression that ZeroPM is quite policy driven. You really want to make an impact that is beyond the science. So science sometimes is even a means to an end, and here you really want to go beyond. And Hans already said that indeed, we also have to speak with people that are not necessarily just a scientist. So for this time, we're going to switch around and we start with the policy, which means that we're going to have my colleague Leonie starting earlier. So I will disappear for a few minutes and Leonie will take the lead of the episode. So see you in a bit.
AlterTalks presents Data Box, the first game about new approach methodologies. You want to be part of the journey towards alternatives to animal research and tests? Change is one game away. Come and embody a scientist on their path to develop a new NAM. Tile by tile, step by step, play your way towards validating your method. Save animals while creating your path. And understand the needed steps for validation and dissemination. Play, learn, raise awareness, discuss, teach, support. May the fun be with NAMs.
Hi everyone, hello Hans and Sarah. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk to you today as well about the ZeroPM project and the policy activities that are going on. I think it's a very interesting project in that regard because you have a dedicated work package to policy. You, through this work package, want to identify opportunities to implement or suggest policy changes. And we have two questions in that regard. Hans, what motivated you to include this work package in the project? And is there currently a lack of sufficient regulation when it comes to persistent and mobile substances?
Well, Sarah, would you like to take this question?
Or we'll keep it as we planned it. Sorry, Leonie, we had it exactly the opposite way around, so we're going to go with that. I mean, I can say that, like you already said, policy is really, really key. And just so that people are aware, one of the reasons why I think we got the project, sorry, this is a little digression, but one of the reasons why we got the project is because we are so kind of founded on the policy. So we read all the policy documents from back to front, and we, luckily, Hans-Peter and I really enjoy it and we really understand. So we really tried to meet the needs of the policymakers. And when we speak to the project officer, that's one of the feedbacks that we get. We're so aligned with what they're trying to achieve at the EU level that they wanted to give us the money because they thought we could, achieve it. So that's like the first thing. And from that, obviously, then we have this policy work package because we see that's really, really, really important. We look at prevention as one of the pillars in ZeroPM, which we'll come back to, but policy is one way to prevent things from being manufactured or used and therefore getting into the environment. So for us, it's a really key preventative action. And when we started the project, we could see that the regulations were kind of not quite there. We were working with UBA before we started ZeroPM because they were the ones who really noted that there was this gap for the mobile substances. These they weren't covered under REACH. And so it's a bit, something's not regulated. How is there a control mechanism? There wasn't a control mechanism. So that was one thing that we tried to focus on in the work package. Let's look at what's missing, how we could make it better. Are there some opportunities that could be harnessed? Obviously, we're not the policymakers, so we don't do that. We don't enforce, we don't make policies, but we can advise. So that's why we have the policy work package. And to answer that fact that there was a lack of regulation.
Yes, and I think what you touched upon is very interesting here too, which partners you brought into the project and into this specific work package to help you on that. Because I think for many people watching, especially we have a lot of young research watching, it's the policy world is a very broad, fast-moving, very complex issue to try to understand. And I think with what you, if you want to tackle that, it is important to also bring experts on that. So you already mentioned you have the German Environmental Agency on board. are there other partners in this specific work package who help you on that?
So we have Milieu, which is a law and policy consulting company, and they have actually written a lot of reports for the European Commission related to scientific frameworks, but also fitness of different policies, need to change policy frameworks. And they incidentally were actually quoted in the text of the call. So the call text comes with this framing, and they referred to a report that Milieu had written. That was also another reason why I contacted somebody at Milieu and said, do you know what? This is in the call text. We would love for you to join. You should definitely join. And they said yes. So we have Milieu and we have UBA. So we feel that we have it covered because we have the policy kind of enforcers, but we also have the policy analysts, which is something different. You know, that's also another world or another section in the policy world.
Yeah. No, it's excellent. It really sounds like it's very well set up. So congrats on that. We have a question now to Hans. Sorry for mixing that up earlier.
Okay.
I assume that most of researchers will agree that it's very important that policy and policy changes are rooted in good science and the latest scientific knowledge. So as a researcher working on the production side of the knowledge, in your opinion, how important is it to communicate this knowledge directly to policymakers?
Yeah, this is incredibly, I mean, it's a clear communication between scientists and policymakers or decision makers is the absolute bridge, the critical bridge on the science policy interface. And there's a lot to disseminate there. And just to complement some of the things that Sarah said earlier, I mean, part of the reason we had part of the framing for the policy in the work package was this document that came out while we were writing the proposal, and that was the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability. And this is like, okay, this was the timeline, this was the guideline that the European Commission wanted to develop policy, but they also needed, you know, the science to go hand in hand so that as they go forward, they're going to be forming that policy in the most correct way. And what they see is like they'll have ambitions and they'll have consultations. And when they have consultations, it's important for everybody, all the stakeholders, to contribute. But when it comes to scientific issues, obviously it's essential for the scientists to come forward and share their knowledge, because sometimes, especially when we're talking about these persistent and mobile substances, we're dealing with huge data gaps. Just to give you an example, there's very few substances for which we have high quality environmental persistency data, actually. There's like for instance, some half-life tests you can do, the OECD tests that see the half-life in soil, but we're only talking about a few hundred chemicals. And there's thousands or hundreds of thousands potentially of chemicals on the global market. And how are you going to address that huge data gap? And the only way to really do that is through science. And so we as scientists can talk about this data gap and how we can work together to both address the missing science, but also in a way that matches the policy ambitions. And there's a lot of learning in that as well, because how policymakers think it's very practical and applied, which is not the same way that scientists like to think. Scientists live in a world of a million variables and uncertainty. And so it's a question of how do we funnel scientific knowledge in a way that policymakers can use. And that's also part of the bridge between science and policy. But it's critical.
Yeah, I agree. And it's excellent that this is so well integrated into the project that deals with a very important subject. And now when we switch more to the scientific side and the different pillars of the ZeroPM project, I will hand back to my colleague Matteo, because it says right here, I see in the screen, we didn't switch the little label because I'm today in the same office space as Matteo, which usually doesn't happen, but I am Leonie. Thank you for answering my questions. And yeah, I will hand over to Matteo again.
Thanks, Leonie.
Thank you very much. The beauty of the live. So, indeed, the policy aspect is wonderful that there is Leonie that can help me with that, because it's very hard, but it's crucial that all these projects have such a root within the policy, because you want to be concrete, you want to have an impact. And let's try to understand a little bit more indeed how this is going to happen with the ZeroPM. And I think you have probably the best logo ever, because it actually encompass everything. I'm gonna just put it there again once so that people can see. Wonderful! You even have your Italia Superman pose with the logo. But you have it on sale, the merchandise of ZeroPM.
Not yet, but not yet. Well, we're looking into it.
That's in the exploitation plan. No, I just wanted to put it again on the screen just to say, it's very clear what you want to do. So you want to zero persistent mobile substances, and you have these 3 pillars: prevent, prioritize, remove. And my question is very simple. It's like, okay, why these 3? Actually, if there is a reason why they are also presented in this way, so one on top of each other with this inverted pyramid, there is more like a visual aspect. And why all of them together, if these were absolutely necessary to have all of them in the same place and to tackle them in the same project. Sarah, or maybe Hans, that's up to you how you want to reply.
No, I think I can answer that, but maybe we can have the logo back on the screen so I can kind of walk through it. Now, first of all, we'll talk about the triangle, because that's where the 3 pillars are: the prevent, prioritize, and remove. This triangle is not our original design. It was actually based on.
Don't say that, Hans-Peter. It's ours.
A little bit of back.
I was going to say it was originally inspired by the Chemical Strategy for Sustainability, where they had something called a toxic-free hierarchy, and it's strongly based on this. It's not a one-to-one, but it's very much inspired by this toxic-free hierarchy approach, and the 3 pillars are, we think, like the order of importance, because if you're really going for zero pollution, the prevention is better than the cure, as they say in medicine, but I think also in the environmental context. So preventing is the easiest way to preventing emissions, preventing production of hazardous substances, for instance. This is the easiest way to prevent pollution. But we do know that there are chemicals released despite maybe our best prevention efforts, or some have to be released because they're critical for the functioning of society. So then we have to prioritize what are these chemicals do we have to put the most focus on, and it also reflects our limited resources. And so this can be based, for instance, in our project, it's based on which chemicals are have the most exposure and risk. These would obviously be things to address first before we address things that aren't being produced yet, as an example, and also ways to make it more efficiently, like how to look at inventories of chemicals and say, oh, these are the ones you should focus on because they have these red flags, such as they belong to a problematic group like PFAS. That's how do you prioritize, rather than looking at theoretical chemicals that don't exist yet. And then removal is the last resort, because there are right now, as you saw in the map from the Forever Pollution Project, there are, and for be a long time, legacy contaminants entering drinking water. So we have to have removal technologies, and they have to be improved. And so this also has to be developed as part of the strategy towards zero pollution. But with the holistic effort that we talked about earlier, getting people involved, this is also important for us, that people involved with chemical manufacturer use and regulation. We're also talking with water quality people, so they could understand each other's challenges. For instance, the removal people say, like, it's really hard for us, really expensive for us to remove these chemicals from drinking water because they have these properties. But then the chemical manufacturer might say, yeah, but these products are critical for that product, and they might argue it's essential. But then they can have kind of a dialogue so that we can have this understand each other's concerns and then work together towards zero pollution.
Yeah, that's a good point indeed. Prioritize might also mean different things for different people. Sarah, you want to add something on that?
No, I mean, just the fact that we have all of them together. Hans-Peter really already said it, but we take this holistic approach, and also we fit our partners' expertise in the different parts of the triangle to bring together something where we know we need to tackle everything. So yeah, I think that's it.
I'd love to see also the logo that you had in mind, but I really like this one. I think there is efficacy in simplicity, and this one really drives the point of what you want to do. So 3 things, they are pretty big, all of them: prevention, prioritization, and removal. I don't know if we're going to have the time to talk about all of them. We kind of went into the prioritization in the prevention with the policy already. I want to go a bit in the prioritization, exactly scientifically. What are you doing? How are you actually going to find which one is going to be the first in which you want to focus? And for this, I am going to use a little help because, as usual, I went on a little trip a couple of weeks ago to see how the researchers within ZeroPM are actually trying to do what they're trying to do. And I will show you a few minutes of footage of how people at the VU in Amsterdam that are part of the ZeroPM project are trying to tackle these analysis of persistent and mobile substances. So see you in 5 minutes.
Yeah, let's start it now.
Space is so cool, they even have a science cafe.
First here we have one cell culturing lab. So here we have one flow cabinet. So in 2021, I obtained my master's degree in toxicology and environmental health at the University of Utrecht. And it was during that study that I found out that I wanted to do a PhD. So then just after my graduation, I just applied for a vacancy for the ZeroPM project here at the Vrije Universiteit. And I was accepted. So yeah, 3 months later, I started here.
We can go to the next lab, which is the heart of the chemistry lab. Where all our working horses are. So I'm an analytical chemist with the years of research in chromatography and mass spectrometry. And throughout my career, I have been identifying chemicals in environment. I was always curious about the risks of the chemicals to the human health and environment. And that's how I ended up in the TIMOS lab.
Here we have the incubators, where you can put your cells and expose them, for example, or just for further culturing. So my main objective is to find out the hazards of persistent and mobile substances to human health. I have a whole battery of tests that I perform, and the things that I measure are mainly focusing on endocrine disruption, on developmental toxicity, on immunotoxicity, and on neurotoxicity. In the end, I will determine the concentration at which all these chemicals have their effects on all these cell types, proteins, and embryos.
So here you can see 2 triple quadrupoles that are mainly used for the targeted analysis, for example, of PFAS or other contaminants. My main research objective is to identify persistent mobile substances because we're working in the ZeroPM project. And for this purpose, we use effect-directed analysis. So by means of LCH-RMS suspect and non-target screening, high-resolution fractionations, and a battery of different bioassays, we are able to prioritize and identify these emerging PM substances. My work is integrated in the work package 6 of the ZeroPM project, which deals with the risk assessment of the chemicals. And results of my findings will be integrated of these chemicals. And colleagues from work package 7 will suggest advanced water treatment methods to mitigate pollution of these important PM substances in sources of our drinking water.
So here is the zebrafish lab. For me, the most interesting thing about the ZeroPM project is that we are looking at chemicals that are persistent and mobile. So these are chemicals that have a high probability of ending up in drinking water. And from a toxicology perspective, it's of course very important because, well, we all humans all drink water. And so if the chemicals are in the drinking water, then we are potentially exposed to relatively high levels of those. So that makes it, of course, very important to know the hazards of those chemicals. And to contribute to that, it's, I think, the nicest thing about ZeroPM projects for me.
Okay, and here is another part. It is called Fractionate. The most interesting thing for me to be part of ZeroPM project is an opportunity to contribute to the safer environment and to the reduction of the risk to the public health. And also I find it very nice, and for me too is an opportunity to collaborate with great researchers involved in the ZeroPM project that work in different areas of sciences.
And that machine is for them. I don't know what it does, but yeah.
A big thank you to Maxime and Timur that they actually spent the day with me. So there was a lot to unpack, but I want to focus on a few things that they mentioned, specifically the assay that they are doing and the system that they are using. So Maxime, I think, mentioned that he's using assay to test immunotoxicity, neurotoxicity, and developmental toxicity. And it was mentioned in cell lines, proteins, zebrafish embryos, so different type of models, not just one. And my question is, why this specific assay, why this specific model, and rather how did you choose them compared to all the other possible things that you could do for persistent and mobile substances? Sarah, I don't know who wants to start.
Yeah, maybe I can start. I mean, so this is not our background, Hans-Peter and I. So you just got to get that, as much, Matteo, as PM substances, which is much. This is what we know for this work package, maybe more. But maybe I just want to also take a step back and just say why we have this risk assessment work package. Because the risk assessment work, it's not just in Amsterdam. We have 2 other partners who are working there, and we're looking at like a full risk assessment. We're looking at hazard and exposure. We need both of them to assess risk. And the reason why we kind of have this risk assessment seems to be a hot topic. There's lots of people talking about risk, as I've understood. There's lots of people arguing about risk. But I think one of the things in ZeroPM, what we're trying to do is we don't have a really good appreciation of long-term chronic exposure to these persistent mobile substances. So that's the one thing that we're trying to go for. And we also, I think, mobile substances, it's quite new. Maybe scientists have seen it for ages and it's been around, but it's quite new. So there's no real, standard frameworks. There's no hazard assessment frameworks. How do you get that into the risk assessment? So that's one of the things. And like you said right at the start, we need to move away from animal testing. So those are the kinds of reasons that motivated us to have the risk assessment and to try and really get to the crux of risk. But as they said in the vlog, they're doing lots of different assays. You know, they have a battery of assays to cover lots of different toxicological endpoints, and some of them are well established and some of them are more novel. And like you just picked up on, the one that they're trying to develop there is pretty novel. I think one of the motivations, or the main motivation for including the one on immunotoxicity, is related to previous work, what's been done. The EFSA guidance values, so those are the ones that everybody's looking at. We have to use these, we have to reach these guidance values. They're based on immunotoxic endpoints. And we know that PFAS, for example, as we've been talking about them, they cause liver damage. So basically, we are trying to develop this assay, which is different to the ones that have been used before. It's more relevant because it tests the true adverse outcome. So it looks at a decrease in the capacity to fight infections. And they're testing it with zebrafish. You said they were testing many other things, but they're testing it with zebrafish infected with bacteria. And they're basically comparing if the infection is exacerbated when the embryos are then exposed to these PM substances. So I think what we didn't touch upon at the start was that in ZeroPM, we're looking at PFAS, but we're also looking at two other groups of substances, triazines and triazoles. So we're doing the test on those as well. And what they're doing at the moment, when you were there, they're developing that bioassay. So I hope that was a good answer to the question.
Absolutely. Maybe that's also why they were using that machine at the end. But
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's Timo's, not sure.
But it's a fascinating concept. I didn't know indeed that there was this study of bacterial infection in embryos to study the immunological response. That sounds extremely cool and complicated. Do you want to add something else?
Well, maybe just something earlier was just maybe more on the exposure aspect as well, because when we first, like before ZeroPM started to have presentations about persistent mobile substances, particularly from the toxicology crowd, we would get questions like, why are you interested in these compounds that have, for instance, rapid excretion rates and they don't bioaccumulate? Some of them might. I mean, there might be some alternative mechanism to lipid binding that causes them to bioaccumulate, but why are you looking at these substances with rapid excretion rates? And the reason is because with some of them we're becoming in equilibrium with our exposure and our exposome. Like for instance, a community that is drinking tainted drinking water every day for years. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're excreting it also every day, they're still getting it every day. So they're becoming in equilibrium with their drinking water. And that was the reason. And then that they understood it better, why we're looking at these compounds. And then that became also interesting because this was as Sarah said, this long-term chronic exposure mechanism was something that hasn't really been taken into account in risk assessment. And so that was also, I think, a scientific novelty for them to explore as well, in addition to its clear importance for human health and the environment.
Yeah, no, that's clear. And I also liked every time that I do these logs to ask the people, what did they like about the project itself? And it's very nice to see that it resonates with them, the fact to work on something that they have an impression that there's a direct impact. So how much this is a real problem. So this is now our drinking water. So we have to find a way to fix it. So I think it's very motivating for them to work for early stage researchers to work in these topics. That's great. I had like 1,000 other questions, but the time is already running out. So I'm going to focus on the one that are really burning for me. And I'm going back again a little bit on the prevention pillar. So joining what Leonie was saying before. So you want to have an impact on the policy aspect, on the decision makers, which is, of course, very important. But you also mentioning that you are trying to bring on board as many stakeholders as possible. So also people from industry, different aspects of the same industry, because as you said before, there may be different stakeholders in different moments of this specific industry. And you are developing a few practical tools. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna just read them so I don't make a mistake. So you want to extend this marketplace and this substituted now list. So you want to really create a list of chemicals that we want to focus on these because these are the most important one, coming from, of course, from the prioritization pillar. My question is a little bit provocative in a sense, because in the OPM project, you often see these practical tools being developed, database, softwares, app, whatever. And the question is always like, okay, but people are going to use that specific tool. How are you making sure that this tool is being used afterwards and it brings the change that you want to bring? So I'd like to know from you which aspect you focus on to make sure that these tools that you are developing will be used and will stay after ZeroPM is finished. Hans, Sarah, as you prefer.
Yeah, well, I can start off by answering that. If the question is just specifically that, like, the tools won't end up in an obscure journal that collects dust in a library.
Yes.
At least this was one of the reasons for us to collaborate with the NGO ChemSec, who has it in their their mandate to help drive the market transition towards more safer and sustainable chemicals. So this is what they get up and they do, right? Unlike, for instance, us science, we go from one scientific question, then go to the next, and sometimes we forget about what we did previously. But that is what they do, and they're very active in marketing their tools, such as the SIN list, including using tools that we don't use as scientists, like doing web analytics to see who uses their specific website, where their clients are. They're actively going out and approaching industry about this and getting them to be members of their business group and consulting group, and very good at the public outreach. And they really put a lot of effort in these tools because they feel like it's what these tools that bring them together. And I would say they're quite successful on it. And I would say something that was really inspiring to see develop at ChemSec, and also in relation to the ZeroPM project through our collaboration, was getting more involved with not just manufacturers or producers of chemicals, but actually financial investors, to show them the value of these tools, so they can say, if you want to make not only a safe and sustainable chemistry, but a safe and sustainable investment, maybe you should invest in companies who are using safer chemicals. And then there's actually more. And then when the financial investors use these tools to, for instance, choose how they're funding companies, then there becomes more attention to it. And it's outside the realm of science. Now it's into the realm of business. And that's where you want it to be, business and regulation. And also, of course, in parallel, if any of our tools are becoming officially adopted by regulators as part of their background documentation to future policy guidelines, this would be another way that we could contribute to lasting work of our prevention tools.
Yeah, I have to say, it's 2 years I'm doing this job. It's probably that's the first time I hear someone really saying the word business within an European project, which is important to do.
Can I add, Matteo? Because what
please,
I see is, so working also for Arcadis, I kind of also sit on this other side, and I talk about ZeroPM all the time, obviously. But there I'm sitting in the business world, and the tools that ChemSec develop, especially things like what could we take PFAS out of and put put in place. And it's not just ChemSec that develop them. Okay, that said, we work with ChemSec, but we have other partners who are doing it too in ZeroPM, and you can find many more databases. But this is what people are interested in. People need to know this. So I think that really these are tools that will stand the test of time, because there's a need from consumers, from regulators, from everybody. You don't want a toxic substance in your product. You won't sell a product, and I also work with a lot of people in America as well. And goodness gracious me, the clear focus is money, portfolios, don't have those toxic substances.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's refreshing, to be honest, to have also this perspective from outside the purely scientific world, where sometimes the question is, as long as the science is good, everything's gonna be fine.
Yeah,
not necessarily. But no, you applied to me a question. I mean, I hope it's gonna work out. Definitely, I encourage people to check the ChemSec work, also communication-wise, because they have the best videos ever that I've seen around. They really do a great job on marketing and this sense. I had again, thousands of questions as always, but time is running out. So I would like to step out from ZeroPM and ask you a couple of personal questions, just to close the event, which are more related to your job. So to be an environmental scientist, so you decided to work on this. because working with toxicologists and environmental toxicologists in the last couple of years made me realize that they are, especially the environmental toxicologist meeting, are always kind of sad, because everybody say, yeah, we try to do our best, but the world is not going in the direction in which we want. I don't know how much it is true, but I'd like to know from your side, how do you keep the motivation working on this specific topic when you see that there are a lot of things out there that doesn't really go in the direction of preventing the damage in our environment, and so on and so forth?
You want to start, Hans-Peter? Hans-Peter's traditionally the optimist of the two of us.
Yeah, no,
Actually, I'm not too sure in the answer to this question what will come through.
No, I do have, Sarah's got it exactly right. I am at my heart, I am an optimist for the future, even though I can point to many signs that the environment is heading towards some type of irreversible state that will not be the same as it was even in our grandfather's time. And I often say, I do know that the state of the environment by the time our grandchildren are old are not going to be the same as it was when our grandfathers were young. In any case, that those worlds are two different worlds. I know that, but I am optimistic that the trajectory can slowly change. And I do have as kind of a life goal that my job as an environmental chemist will become redundant, because we figured how to use chemicals sustainably and to treat them well. I mean, that's like my ultimate career goal, targeting towards a future of zero pollution. So I do think the environment will get worse, but I'm recovering that we can flatten how bad it will get and then slowly recover after that.
I see. Maybe we should have the zero environmental scientist ambition for the for the European Commission. Then it's going to be fine. We don't need to study this anymore. It's fine. We fixed it. That would be wonderful. Well, not wonderful because you don't have a job anymore, but wonderful for the environment.
Well, there will be better things to do.
Yes. Sava, you want to add something?
I mean, I actually kind of don't feel that. I mean, I know that there's problems and there's many environmental problems that we could cite, but just actually speaking to my friends and my family about the work that I do, I noticed that they have a huger appreciation of what's happening. And to me, that's already the first step. So for my dad to be able to say, well, do you know what, actually, should we buy this pan because does it contain PFAS? Could just remind me. I think actually that we've gone quite far, because that's one of the first ways to stop. So I'm quite motivated by that. And I talk to my children about things like this, and I see that they're interested, and that motivates me as well. And I kind of, that's Hans-Peter's ambition. My ambition is to get onto the BBC News to say, you know what, this is ZeroPM and this is what we're doing and this is why you should listen. So let's see.
Impact to society, huge motivator.
Exactly. It's society that will push for a change. And if society understands and has knowledge, then they're at least able to ask the right questions, which might lead to a more sensible answer.
Great. I mean, we're not the BBC, but we were happy to be able to give you.
Yeah, this is my first step. This is my first step, Matteo. This is great. Yeah.
When you're gonna be on live television, BBC, you can mention that you did the first trial of the TOXstreams. That would be.
We'll do.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I had, as usual, I have always so many other questions, but the time is running out. So I think it's the moment where we can cut it. Unless, is there something that you wanted me to ask you that I didn't ask you? Or something else you want to say on ZeroPM, on you, on PFAS, on environmental science, how people, for example, can also do something on their own, maybe up to you. If you have something that you want to leave as a message.
Yeah, well, Matteo, maybe you could ask, how could people find out more information about ZeroPM, such as looking at zeropm.eu? Or do we have a Twitter page? Yes, we do. I still call it Twitter, by the way. Do we have a LinkedIn page? Absolutely. And we also on Mastodon. But please, and YouTube. Very active on YouTube. So if you haven't checked this out on YouTube, please do so. We have over 72 videos, and hopefully we'll add this video to our collection.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll be hosting some more webinars, and we will have 2 workshops coming up. So those are some ZeroPM events.
Yes.
Cool. Well, I know you are super busy with all these activities. It's wonderful that honestly you found the time to spend 1 hour for me on this. I think communication is crucial also in this setting, and I was very happy to have you here for 1 hour. So any more information you want to see, you want to know, zeropm.eu is the place to be. That's it. Thank you very much for taking the time for staying with me. I hope to see you around again in some conference or whatnot. And otherwise, I wish you good luck with ZeroPM and any other things that you're going to do with your life.
Thanks
so much, Matteo.
Thanks, Matteo.
See you around. So that was it. Thank you very much for sticking with me till the end of this episode. As I said, this is kind of the first episode of the series where we are going to have a look of other European projects. ZeroPM is just the first one. We're going to see all the other part of this Green Deal cluster, and they are all trying to make the environment a little bit safer from all of us. So just stay tuned on our social media. We will soon publish the other dates of the other project. That was it. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. And if you want to know more or you want to reach out for TOXstream or something, you know where to find us, altatalks.academy.be. For the rest, see you next time.